We'll explore the archetypes of American politics and rip the veil off the weaponization of race with author Kevin McGary on this episode of United Patriots Uprising with Gary Binford. I'm your host, Gary Binford. Thanks for joining us. The podcast is available at radioinfluence.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. The video version you can find at YouTube, Rumble, the God Family and Country Television Network, the Rose Unplugged Media Network, vachristian.org, Conservative Television of America, and the AmericaFirstWarehouse.com. Wherever you go to find the show, please subscribe. It'd be nice if you leave a rating and a review, and make sure to tell your friends about the show. First 3 years were audio only, 180 high-profile guests were on the show, several times. If you go to radioinfluence.com, United Patriots Uprising, find the archive of this show, you will hear guests including Ben Carson, Carrie Lake, Kevin Sorbo, Carol Swain, Diamond and Silk, Judge Janine Pirro, Monica Crowley, Sheriff David Clark, Morgan Brittany, Kira Davis, Tom Holman, Rebecca Friedrichs, Vince Everett Ellison, Pastor Jack Hibbs, Lucretia Hughes, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, Star Parker, Wayne Allen Root, and Dr. Linda Lee Tarver. And what they had to say back then is still valid today. So we hope you'll check that out. You know, I really like bringing Kevin McGary on because he understands the difference between theology, which is God-given, and ideology, which is man-made. And one of the problems, and one of the major problems we have had in this country, was choosing ideology and bad ideology to run the nation. And that's how this socialist, Marxist, communist, that's how all this bad stuff seeped in and infested and infected our nation. And now we have to get rid of it while we still have time. So he wrote a great book about this, explaining how we got into this mess and what we need to do to get out of it. Ready to hear? Well, let's get into it. My guest is an entrepreneur, author, public speaker, and ministry leader who holds a PhD in Christian ministry leadership. He has 35 years of experience in information technology and leads a group of proactive individuals focused on developing innovative solutions to contemporary social political issues. He's also the co-founder of Every Black Life Matters, an organization dedicated to civic engagement and biblical justice. He's been on the show several times previously when it was audio only. I welcome back the author of 8 published books, the latest entitled Reveal, The Archetypes of American Politics, a man who brings sanity to the Bay Area, Mr. Kevin McGary. How are you, Kevin?
Gary, always a pleasure to be with you, brother.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to have you back. And it's 8 books. I can't even figure out how to write one. So 8, that's wonderful. And we will get into some of your previous books, which you talked about when you're previously on the show. But let's talk about this recent book, The Archetypes of American Politics, Revealed, right? It offers an insightful critique of cultural schemes that undermine American principles, traditions, and biblical truths. You say that people experience a pervasive psychosis when it comes to politics. Well, you got to unpack that one for us.
Yeah. Well, any doubts about that statement after looking at what happened just a couple days ago at the president's address to Congress? That was a real disaster for leftist, progressive, Marxist, Democrat crazies because they couldn't stand for a 13-year-old cancer survivor that's actually beating the odds. They couldn't stand for young women who lost their lives and now had, as a tribute, parks named after them and at least bringing some consolation to the family. They couldn't stand with the hostage the situation, the hostage that came back with his 94-year-old mother. No, they couldn't because there's a problem, and it's not simple, like, oh, okay, they're just Democrats and we're Republicans. No, this is beyond that. This goes to the core of who we are in our soul, right? And so there is a psychosis that drives their actions, right? So what Malcolm X did in 1963, he really broke some things down for him. Malcolm X is brilliant, in so many ways. But in 1963, he said he was given a speech to a message to the grassroots in Michigan. And he said, look, he says, in so many ways, America is metaphorically like plantation. He says, look, I've studied plantations. I understand the life on the antebellum South and what it was like on plantation living and all of that. And he said there were some profound dynamics that came out of the interpersonal play on the plantation. And he says, look, America is really very much like that life. He says, now, we don't, we're not enslaved in chains like that and like that. But he says, the basic archetype, if you will, of the overlords is still at play. You have your American political leaders that are basically the overlords over everybody else, and they have these they have this way of taxing us. They have this way of silencing us. They have this way of going after us and different ways to even incarcerate us if they want to, if they need to. He says, then you have your so that's like the old plantation owner, the overlord, right, of the plantation. He says, but plantation owner relied heavily on his slave network because he had a lot of slaves. Now, what was interesting about the actual slave network on the plantation is that if you're an owner and you have, 2 kids and a wife and you got 80 acres and you have, 15 slaves doing that, there's no way you can monitor what's going on and make sure that nobody escapes and all that. He says, so what the plantation owner did is they solicited those who were gullible, those who were malleable, those who were easily manipulated, and they brought them into the house. They called them the house Negro, the house slave.
Right.
And he says, so that's what you have with like your main media, with your the people doing the bidding of this sort of overlord architecture, because the house slave is just purely obedient to the master, to the overlord. And he says, so the house slave, the reason why they did this is because they were compensated, they were paid to do it, right? So he says, like they had, they slept in the plantation house, the main house, either in the attic or the basement. He says that they ate food, they ate their meals with the plantation owner and his family. They would get choice hand-me-downs from the plantation owner, so they were compensated. Their compensation was for make sure that those field slaves, those field Negroes, do not escape. The job of the house slave is to make sure nobody escapes the plantation, even though they themselves are enslaved. They were doing the bidding of the overlord, and because they were compensated and made sure that nobody escaped.
I have to stop you right there, Kevin, for 1 second, because you were so right about this assessment of how it's broken down. Because the thing that blows my mind about the mainstream, the disingenuous mainstream media today is if another foreign country, if China or something were to take us over because they're not letting people know what the main problem is, they're still going to be in the sauce with us. They're not going to be running anything. And if the communists take over, they're not going to be running anything because they know they're weak and stupid, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you'll be able to see this overlay, this metaphorical overlay quite clearly here after I finish up these components, and then we'll talk through how it manifests today. So he says the field slaves, he says that would be like me, that would be like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Henry Box. These are the folks that escaped. They said, look, I'm going to pretend like I'm working in the field, but my number one goal is not to work for anybody. God gave me innate natural rights, and it's me and God. I don't care. I don't want any part of any kind of coercive environment where I have to be somebody's slave. He says, so the field slaves, their number one goal, always paramount in their mind and in their soul, was escape. He said all they wanted to do is be free. He said, so if you overlay that on to today, and this was in the 60s, but let me overlay that on to today. We have the World Economic Forum, we have the World Health Organization, the WHO, we have UN, we have IMF, we have all of these that are the globalist overlords. We have people here in America, political parties, that all they do is the bidding of the globalist overlord, trying to coerce us into this one world sort of globalist, great reset kind of paradigm, right? So the media's in on it. The media spins stories always from a leftist, progressive, Marxist perspective, trying to seduce us into this sort of new utopia that they envision with the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab and those guys. And then, and so you have the media, you have academia, you have all of your elites in Hollywood. They're all grossly, greatly embracing the house slave, the house Negro paradigm. Their number one job is to make sure that they falsify stories, that they conceal truth, that they do whatever they can to, and that they guilt us and shame us and call us names like Nazi and Hitler and all of this stuff. These people know better than that, but their job is to keep us on the plantation. And so, and when I say us, I mean like you and I. We embrace the pathology of the field Negro, the field slave. We just want to be free. Look, no, I don't want your autocratic rules. I don't want your totalitarian or authoritarian mindset. I'm free. Me and God. He created me as and gave me natural rights as an individual, inalienable rights, and those are the rights that I'm embracing. I'm leaving any kind of coercive mindset. I'm a free thinker. I'm going to do my own thing. That's us. So when you understand what's happening from that perspective, you understand why you can't. We used to be able to agree to disagree, with our friends and family members and all of that around politics years ago. We used to be able to do that. Now it's not, and it's because the entrenched nature of the psychosis that unfortunately a lot of people that we know embrace won't allow them to even see principled truth. They won't allow them to embrace morals. They won't allow them to celebrate people who have come out of horrible situations like we saw the other night. It is a psychosis. This is not natural what we're seeing right now. And if we understand it from that perspective, then we understand what we can do. We can pray for these people. They have Stockholm syndrome, and one degree to one degree or another. In other words, they're seduced and compelled by those who have captured them, either captured their heart or their mind or their imagination, and that would be in the Democrat Party. And Stockholm syndrome, if you know, it's when you basically closely associate with your actual captor. Over time, you just can't leave them because there's this connection, right?
And Patty Hearst.
Yeah, exactly right. And so many other stories we have, of people who were, young people who were captured on the street and then, used as sex slaves. And then, when it's time for them to leave, maybe when they're teenager or young women, they couldn't because that connection is there. So this is a real thing. This is not, imagine the only rational, rational way to discern what's happening within those around us who so closely associate with the Democrat Party is that they do have some level of Stockholm syndrome. Sincerely, I'm not trying to cast aspersions at anybody, but this is the case. Now, the thing about Malcolm X's metaphor, this overlay, is that it really everybody in America fits into one of these three categories. You're either of the globalist billionaire, mover and shaker type, who want to move us into a communist utopia, or you are a house slave, house Negro, who really just wants to make sure that everybody else conforms, that we're a collective.
Hold on, people. He's not talking about race here in real Negroes. He's using what happened back in the day to just show you that this is an overlay of the same type of thing. So this isn't a race thing, as he's putting it. This is more of a worldwide social thing, right?
Exactly. This applies to anybody and everybody. It has nothing to do with skin color, nothing to do with ethnicity. This is an overlay, and it's a pathology. that we're following.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in a pathology of an overlord. You're in the pathology and following the pathology of the house slave or the house Negro. And you and I, Gary, would be following the pathology of the field slave,
Yeah.
field Negro, right? So because
I'm
we just want to
born
be
again in Jesus Christ. I'm free. And
yeah, just free.
what the Lord has set free is free indeed. So, and
Exactly.
as I always say on the show, Kevin, if government gives you your freedom, government can take it away.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's why we have to embrace the natural rights that God gave us, the inalienable rights that our forefathers and you know the pioneers of the Constitution have written for us, reinforcing the fact that they you know these the Constitution has nothing to do with our inalienable rights from God. So these are things that everybody has, right? So if we understand, you know, sort of the American political scenario from that perspective, we understand that when we see people like Joy Reid, you know, Nicole Wallace, and some of these other folks that are just way crazy with their, you know, disparaging remarks, you know, even when we see
Jasmine
Jasmine
Crockett.
Crockett, she's horrible, but she has a role. You see, she's worth now over $10 million. She's been making a congressional pay of 175,000. So she's been paid to do what she's doing. Uh, you know, we have to. It helps us to see them, right? These people are not ignorant. These are not stupid people. And at some level, they do have basic human instincts that know that, you know, I'm giving these people a bunch of BS, but you know, hey, I'm getting
I've been
paid. This is what I'm
paid.
doing. Yeah, and so it's that syndrome that you could clearly see now, right? You know, Bill Maher, you know, all of these other, you know, crazy leftist types. And I name names. So I help you to understand who really fits in these archetypes, right? In this book, Revealed, the Archetypes of American Politics.
Well, Kevin, let me ask you a question before you go further, because there's a question that people are going to want to know. How did we get in this position? Because it couldn't happen overnight. So, and I call it a spirit of delusion, that they're delusional Stockholm syndrome. Basically, regardless of whatever name we put on it, they are not rational. So how did we get here? You want to take people down the genesis, and I'm sure it's in the book, of how we allowed ourselves to get put in this position as a nation.
Yeah. So there's a couple of factors, right? One is the whole false narrative about race as a social distinction, right? There is no, you know, I'm going to make a sort of an audacious statement. I'll break it down here in a second, but there is no such thing as race. It's a made up distinction. It is a false narrative. Now, different ethnicities, absolutely. But race as a distinction, I'll show you when, where, and how it came into being. And so we could see together that this is clearly made up. But our embrace of it and following you know, the constructs, if you will, of ideology, which would be mostly Marxist now, that is really taken over all of the world, has really put us in this place to be vulnerable to these types of psychosis that are now coming at us on all these different sides. So let me break a little bit down about race, because a lot of people don't understand. Well, Kev, how do you say that race doesn't really exist? Okay.
And Kevin,
So
before you do that, can I just say one thing? The only thing that the Bible says about race is to run the good race and finish the race.
there you go. So, you know, Gary, on your show, I'm sure most of the people on your show, the overwhelming majority, are people of faith. Now, the Bible clearly depicts what happened. Adam and Eve, right? The fall in the Garden of Eden. And then from that fall, so we have Adam and Eve as our, you know, parents, right? All of mankind comes and flows from that. And from the fall in the Garden of Eden, then we have this fallen nature that covers all men. But fundamentally, with that fallen nature is this idea that you're not like me, so I have this innate distrust of you. Right? It wasn't like you could run into somebody else's territory in ancient biblical days and come out unscathed. If you
Getting
went
whacked.
over, I mean, the Bible's clear about
Mhm.
tribalism and territorial fights and wars that were going on in ancient biblical times, right? So this is something that was happening since the beginning of time. So tribalism and ethnic strife were always part of the fallen nature of man. That we inherited that. That's just part of it. Now, so that's really the way it was up until there's this guy by the name of Charles Darwin who came down. And I'm truncating a lot of facts here.
Uh-huh.
It's all in my book, Woked Up. It explains really methodically. It takes you to all of the footnotes on it and everything's there. But so Charles Darwin comes around in the early 1800s, and Charles Darwin. A lot of people don't understand that Charles wanted to basically have the aristocrats over in Europe sort of invite him into that sort of inner circle, because he was sort of an outcast, a crazy scientist. He wasn't, they didn't take him seriously. So when he did his studies, he wanted to make sure that he appealed and ingratiated himself to that caste, right? So he says, look, I'll come up with this evolution, this theory of evolution, where, there is no God, and where, basically men evolve in these different this are the first to have fully evolved. This is all in his books, first book, and then the second book, The Descent of Man, mostly is where this is fully articulated. He said, we white Europeans or, Caucasians are the first to have evolved. He says, so, we're the original design, and every other ethnicity that evolves after us is a variation of the same theme, but at a lesser degree, because you have degradation with each subsequent ethnicity. He says, now the real problem, the real issue is we have these, blacks. They're still subhuman, apes, gorillas, and savages. Now, an astute mind would see that this is the inculcation of white supremacy, because what he said is, we whites, we're supreme. We're, this is who we are. He says, now, blacks, and so it's also the inculcation of, if you will, of racism. Blacks, since they're still subhuman and they're still trying to climb the evolutionary scale, and they're synonymous with apes, gorillas, and savages, how could you treat them the same? There is no, of course you're going to treat them differently. Why would you invite them in your place of work? These people are, savages, right? So first time in human history, so I want everybody to kind of follow this. First time in human history that a scientific mind, renowned scientific mind, because he was well known, embraced the theory that, first of all, completely X'd out God, and
Right.
second of all, showed supremacy and racism in his talking points. But fundamentally, what he did is he's basically entered in this whole concept of race, this race classification, and said that some races are more evolved and better cognitively and intellectually than other races. The first time. We had tribalism before, we had ethnic strife before, but nobody saw anybody that they captured, anybody of different races or ethnicity as being subhuman. That's a new distinction at this time when Darwin made this claim. So because of that, he had these other schemes. Of course, eugenics. He and his first cousin Francis Galton started because they wanted to get rid of everybody that was not well born, and so that was the whole abortion thing. That's a made up distinction. There's no science behind it. There's nothing behind it. It's completely made up, and that's why people like you and I are so adamant about making sure that we don't fall into that racist trap. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. That is where race, the whole idea of race and race classification comes from. It comes from the early 1800s until now. But the problem is that all of the world has embraced this false narrative. And
even though we've kicked Darwin to the curb?
Even though we kicked him to the curb, his protege, a lot of people don't know, his first protege was Marx and Engels.
Yep.
They, And so they fully embraced all of Darwin's work, put it into their work, and then and sort of made sure it was intertwined in their economic theories, and so it was it caused all the mass casualties around the world.
You want to say something about Margaret Sanger?
We don't need to go there, but most of your people are probably already familiar with her and all of that. She was a eugenicist here in the United States, started with female sterilization, and then went into all of her her family planning clinics, which are now Planned Parenthood, which are specifically designed to exterminate blacks, which was her infamous quote. But here's the point, Gary. So because we believe in the false narrative and we've allowed it to sort of root in all of our hearts and minds, we actually do see race distinctions as if they actually exist. We're all one human race. The Bible is clear about this. Why do we struggle with this, right? So a lot of the angst that comes out of ideology, right? Marxist ideology, and which all is socialism, social justice, critical social justice, all of these theories, right? DEI and all this, they're all fully rooted in some sense, in some major sense, with the false narrative of race being the major characteristic. So this is what we've allowed ourselves to be seduced by, and allowed ourselves to really motivate us to action or inaction towards one degree or another. And because the Democrats have so embraced this ideology, like there really is a distinction, we really cannot survive without changing the rules for blacks and Hispanics, which everybody who's a thinker would recognize. Well, wait a minute, that's racist. Where does that come from? I can't get ahead because you, Mr. Cynical white savior complex, you need to help me. Excuse me? No. Give me a level playing field. We've proven throughout history. Blacks are resilient, more than overcoming any obstacle. That we've had some of the worst obstacles that any ethnicity can have here in America, and we've overcome them, right? So why is it all of a sudden when we come to the 2020s that we need DEI, we need critical race theory, we need all these other schemes to sort of level the playing field? Because they're from the demonic Marxist ideology, and we've moved away from theology. So here's what I'd like to say. Most of your folks here are Christians and practicing Christians. We have theology that guides us, right, to our action, right? What we believe, what we embrace, those things. Theology. Ideology is man's attempt at being wise, at being relevant, right? When we begin to immerse into ourselves into ideology that would be outside of the practicum of theology, that's when we get into these purely antithetical, anti-human, anti-American mindsets that will not allow us to then, embrace the world from a rational, principled, logical perspective. Does that make sense? I hope I'm not.
Yeah, you laid it out. You laid it out, and there's a scene in Jesus of Nazareth. I don't know if you've seen the movie. It's about 9 hours long. It was made in the 70s, and Anthony Quinn is playing Caiaphas, and they have Robert Palmer in there. He's playing Jesus, and the Pharisees have arrested him, and they have him on trial. And they're going, and Anthony Quinn is just sitting there, just totally bored with the witnesses, and they're trying to figure out, did Jesus say this and that? And he says, let's cut to the chase. I'm going somewhere here. And he goes, are you the son of... He couldn't even get the word God out. So I'm going to do my best Anthony Quinn imitation and say, Kevin, where would America be heading right now if they had won the election and Donald Trump was now president, not president? Oh my gosh. Where would we be? DEI and everything. Oh, where would we be, bro?
Really, really. And I told people this even before. I said, look, we're already in the last of the last days, according to Revelation. This is my interpretation. Take it or leave it. But if we would have had her as president, it would have accelerated our time, right? And it would have, I think, caused a lot of things to really speed up, including the return of Christ.
They
So I
have
mean,
to, right? Yeah.
because the kind of damage that would have been done would have been irreparable. The kind of calamity that would have been continued to have been exploited around the world. You look at USAID and everything that they're doing, the amount of trillions they would have bankrupted us, because that was the goal, right? The only way they can move America into this great reset, they had pretty much all the other countries, but the only way to
Mhm.
move America is to make sure it is to bankrupt her, and then we'd be forced in. Kamala would have said, "Look, we can't afford to even pay our interest on the debt. This great reset thing is a way that we can sort of be a part of the world system, and we have to do it because we're bankrupt as a country." And so so we would have fallen straight into that very, very quickly, in which I think would have hastened the end of days. But that's just my interpretation of it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and DEI and all this stuff that we're sending money out to, and everything that we're now learning that Trump's Elliot Ness style Untouchables team is going to unveil. That just what we've seen already, where people are like, "Oh my gosh, Kevin, you ready to blow to people's minds?" Because I know what people think every time they see a black person, be it male or female, that comes from a Christian conservative point of view. They're like, yeah, you were born in the burbs, you were a bougie, this and that. Yeah, I get it, but you don't really know what it's like. So blow their minds, give them your background.
Yeah, so I was born in the San Francisco in the Hunters Point project housing in 1960s. so that if you know anything about the 1960s, Hunters Point project, that was where the Black Panthers actually had their headquarters there, started there. And so I was there, and then grew up in that sort of community, and then lower middle class. We moved out of there a few years later, and was just a hoodlum in the hood. I mean, I just did basic inner city urban type stuff, hanging out the corner and getting in trouble here and there, and that kind of life. I never
Beating people up.
I used to kind of enjoy bullying a little bit, and and so I was reckless and a fool, and so I did that kind of stuff. And but here's what kept me on the straight and narrow. My father at the time was just off of his rocker, alcoholic. So all of my formative years, I mean, he would come home just drunk every day. But the thing is, he came home, right? So I didn't even think about dropping out or being real in the streets, and actually getting arrested, or not getting good grades. My mother used to tell me, "Look, if you don't bring home those grades, I mean, I'm gonna sick your drunk daddy on you, and he'll take care of you." So I was like, "Okay, well." So I stayed in school, got good grades. So when I graduated, I had a B plus average. And I said, well, I don't know what to do. So I went to San Jose State, got a sociology degree. So here you have a guy who's steeped in abject poverty, born into that, steeped in urbanite living, inner city kind of, that kind of stuff. And then, goes to San Jose State, get a sociology degree. So I'm steeped in Marxism. I understand all of that, right? So this is not like, like you said, a guy who's, born with a silver spoon and then decided to become a Republican early or a conservative early. That's just not that's just not my reality. So it wasn't until later in life when I married the love of my life 38 years ago. We got married. We decided that we wanted to live strictly biblically and raise our family strictly according to biblical standards. And we started to be disciple, and we took a look at all these domains of our life. When we got to civic engagement, we took a look at the two platforms and were blown away. So because both my wife and I and our children were raised in this way to be free thinkers, independent, to the core. I mean, being part of a collectivist or group action is just not that's just not us. I don't care what the consequences are. Nobody else in my family is conservative or Republican. Nobody else in my wife's family is conservative or Republican either. but we don't care. We just, come on, we're independent, come on. So this is again, the field slave mentality. We just want to embrace that, and we've taught that to our children to do the same. So because of that, we were just practical. We said, look, this platform that we had thought was a good one for us and for our community, it's terrible. It's actually enslaving us and putting us deeper and deeper in debt, more and more in poverty. This other one is more indicative of God and godly values and family values and Americanism and all that. So we went with being more conservative. This is Reagan's second term, and so for us, it's not even ideology. We don't care whether it's Republican or Democrat. There's some fundamentals that we care about. Life, 100% from conception, and honoring God in every way, including what God says about marriage, what God says about genders and sex and all that. So those are the things that, and if you had a Democrat that would conform to that, that's fine. We don't care. Again, we're not ideological conformists. We don't conform in any way. We're guided by theology, by the Bible. So that's us. So that was my upbringing and all of that. Used to enjoy fighting, and then when I had my son, we got into martial arts, and I was a grandmaster here in this area, in Northern California, for a few years in martial arts, and then tore my ACL, and those days were over. So now I'm doing the fighting for the hearts and minds and the souls of men, based on my writings and my speaking, and that's that's where we can win. But we have to educate people and help people to come along and wake up and get out of this psychosis. And unfortunately, a lot of people are stuck in. So we have to help them to kind of resolve that.
And you've been doing a great job. That great testimony. We all have a testimony, and that's what God gives us. When you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, your background becomes your testimony, because a lot of people will say, well, you don't know where I came from. And they hear your background and go, what? God can bring you through that. So you said now it's all about your writings and everything. And it's the same thing for me, using this show as a platform. When back in the day, I was a Democrat too, until I got born again in 1997. So you talk about your writings. This is your 8th book. Tell people about some of your other stellar works that led up to this point, because you took on woke, you took on DEI, critical race theory, you took on a whole bunch of things. So what would you like to highlight?
Yeah, DEI and 3D. There's still a lot of questions, especially in the Black community and the faith communities, about DEI is good, bad, or indifferent. DEI and 3D, you can get it off Amazon. But basically what it does is it gives you a cogent look. It's not ideological at all. It just basically gives you the facts. Where does this come from? Why is it here? What do you do about it? At the end of the day, you arrive at your own conclusions, but it takes you through methodically. So your conclusions, if you're a thinker, are going to really recognize that DEI is just another Marxist construct, right? That's what it is. I don't start with that as a presupposition. I start with, hey, let's just look at this. Let's find out how we got here. And I take the reader through all of it. So you're fully educated along the way on what DEI is and what it's not, and where it is, and how to deal with it. And so that's a good one. Woked Up is the one I characterize, that the name of it is Woked Up, finally putting finally putting the axe to the taproot of white supremacy and racism in America. And basically I expose this whole narrative about Charles Darwin and Marx and that whole thing, and I tear that whole thing apart. There's some other very important elements that you have to understand historically that fed into that as well, and that's in the Woked Up book. If you just type in Kevin McGary, McGary, in Amazon, you'll get all of these books coming up. So you can do it. The website there you can find me if you want me to come speak or communicate with your communities or wherever they are around the country. I do travel a lot, and I get out a lot and have speaking engagements. So you can find me on everyblm.com, everyblm.com.
I hear you, Kevin. Do I have time to ask you one more question?
Yeah, please. What
Okay.
you want, bro?
Okay. Well, here is the question. You got a great book here. The Archetypes of American politics, we've talked about all the problems. Now we have everybody up on the bridge getting ready to jump off. So let's save them. Do you have any solutions in the book for how to get out of this mess?
Yeah. So one of the best things that we can do is, first of all, we don't, if we know that that people that we're trying to really understand what's going on, but they have no room for us. In other words, they say, look, I don't care what you say, Kev. I'm a Democrat through and through, mom and them, grandmom and them, everybody and them. This is where I am. I don't, let's not waste our time and mental cycles with trying to get that 30% of people that are just entrenched Democrats. But we should understand that they're under that spell. They're under that plantation thinking, that psychosis, and it's got a stronghold on them. Okay, we should be praying for them, but we're probably not going to change them, right? But for moderates, independents, and all of that who give us room to have a conversation, we should have that conversation, because some of those people can easily be manipulated and deceived into, really embracing these other, ideologies, especially Democrat, leftist, progressives. And so we really want to bring more of those people off of that, and help them to, if we break down the archetypes and we help them to see how this is all sort of overlaid onto America and everybody's part of it, say, which one are you? Or do you just really want to be free? At the end of this book, what it does is it gives you, it basically gives you the solution. It says, look, if you completely, sincerely, in your heart, want to be free, you cannot be a Marxist. You understand why? Marxism in any form is authoritarian and totalitarian. You understand, right? Social justice and all that, that's authoritarian. You have to you have to conform in this way or that way. You have to do this and that. You have to make remedies for this person, that person. That's authoritarian. Totalitarian, it's in its total, when it's totally exploited, that's communism. And that's, of course, Marx, his utopia. So you cannot, if you say, look, yeah, Kev, I want to be free, but I love social justice. There's no such thing. If that's your goal, look, I just want to be, I like, socialist type stuff. I think that has some merit. Then you're just saying, okay, I'm perfectly fine with being on the plantation and serving the exploits of the overlords. And that's fine. Some people, they say that. Look, I'm a diehard Marxist. I don't care. Fine. Do you. It's okay. It's no problem. But for all of us that really want to be free, there's only one way to be free. And that's to make sure that we, completely sever any ties with Marxism or any kind of corrosive ideologies that they try to force and guilt and shame you into. You say, look, I'm done with those. I'm done with that. It's over. I'm leaving the plantation, and I'm on my way to freedom. That's the only way to be free. So it's binary. It really is a binary choice. Every American can make that choice. You want to be free? Okay. Completely renounce and denounce anything Marxist. That and John 8:32, talks about being set free as well. So the bottom line is, look, what we're doing is just trying to help people by virtue of educating people how to live this life in the freest way possible. So you and God can do your thing without any, other, crazy or persuade you to embrace some kind of enslavement.
Well, this poses another question now, because I loved your answer, and you said you must leave the plantation. But is that enough? But is it enough to be just to say, because I know a lot of people who said, I'm done with the Democrats, but so now they're just going to stick their head under a pillow or hide in the closet and not take a stand for anything. Is that enough, or do they have to join us? Do they have to come to the Christian conservative side? Do they have to come to MAGA or come to the other side and help us defeat them? Because if you're standing in the middle, you're lukewarm, and if you're not for us, you're still kind of against us.
Well, okay, so I think in some people's mind, it's incrementalism, right? I'm perfectly happy with people leaving the Democrat plantation and say, look, I'm just going to be independent. I don't know how I'm going to come down or this or that. I'm just going to do me, and I don't know. That's perfectly acceptable. That's a good first step. I think we should encourage, whether they will ultimately turn out to be conservatives or MAGA, or those are ideologies as well that we don't need people to necessarily embrace. Let's just celebrate the fact that they're getting away from that mindset that drove them into, conscripted them into a certain way, a pathology that forced them into acting, believing, and being motivated by lies, false narratives and stuff like that. So I still consider that a victory.
Okay. Well, Kevin, as always, I really enjoyed speaking with you. Once again, tell people how they can find you, especially on social media, and anything you still would like to promote.
Yeah, so I do have a YouTube channel. It's called Off the Plantation, The Journey Towards Freedom. And I do a lot of short videos, long form videos, and go into detail about, and this is all, applying the metaphorical overlay that Malcolm X provided us with what's happening day to day. So a lot of stuff of what happened earlier this week, you'll go to my videos, you'll see those because those are already there. But I'm breaking down on that site on YouTube those types of issues and help you to be an observer and be a thinker. Let's just start thinking stuff through. We don't need to just automatically embrace these false narratives coming from legacy media and all this other stuff. Let's be thinkers. So that's what that's for. Please subscribe to that channel. There's a lot of good content there that you could share and help set other people free as well. And then, of course, you can, again, find me at everyblm.com. And so that's our main website. You'll find out more about Every Black Life Matters on that website as well, what we stand for and all of that. Love your support as a partner, as a friend, whatever. So you can get us there. And then my books, Amazon, just type in Kevin McGary, you'll get the whole list, and you can, decide which books or buy all of them if you want from there.
Yeah, well, Kevin, I've really enjoyed having you here. As you probably would know, I don't embrace Malcolm X as a follower of Jesus. I don't embrace him, but I do embrace what he said here, because see, a lot of people have good ideas that, didn't necessarily follow Christ, but they could have some good ideas. And his breakdown, the way you broke it down, of the slavery system, where you had the house Negroes and where you had the lords and where you had the people that were trying to get away, is a valid thing that I do agree with. So I thought you brought that out very well, the way you put it. So what's next? What's up next for you? Do you have anything else in the works?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about Malcolm X. A lot of people can't get on with Malcolm X, and that's fine. But there's a lot of people throughout history that have said some profound things, invented some profound things, and all of that. And they had a demented heart, demented mind, but they've really made some significant accomplishments to the overall, human flourishing. So this is not about Malcolm X and that he was a great person, and that's why I'm using this quote. It's about he was brilliant in this regard, and I'm glad you framed it that way, because we can learn from anybody, and it doesn't really matter whether they're Christian, non-Christian, or Nation of Islam, whatever. There could be some profound truths that we can get, and it helps, right? Next projects you were asking about?
Yeah, because you're always thinking ahead. I know that about you.
I do have some pretty significant exploits that are coming up mid-year. I'm not free to talk about those at the moment.
That's fine.
By June, it'll be more apparent, and I may be able to speak about it, if you invite me in later in the year, in the fall. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Kevin, thanks for coming on, and God bless you and God bless your family. Keep up the great fight.
God bless you, Gary. Thank you again for having me. I'm looking forward to the next time, brother.
Oh, you got it. There you have it, Mr. Kevin McGary. I want to thank Kevin McGary for coming back on the show and setting the record straight about the archetypes of American politics and putting race in its place, in the garbage, where it belongs. The only thing in the Bible about race is that we run the good race. There's no all this DEI, CRT, you did that, we did this. That's all man-made, all contrived. He told us why. And what it is geared to do is split the nation and usher in the Marxist, socialist, communist agenda that we can't have, people. Oh, we came so close to losing this country. If President Trump hadn't won this election, everything that you see being taken out would not only be in, but now they put the pedal to the metal. So for the time being, we have a chance to get our nation back, to get back to the Christian constitutional roots. And we need to do this, people, while we still have time. So Kevin, thank you for who you are and what you do, and keep up the great fight. This podcast is available at radioinfluence.com or wherever you find your podcast. You can get the video version at YouTube, Rumble, the God, Family, and Country Television Network, the Rose Unplugged Media Network, vachristian.org, Conservative Television of America, and the AmericaFirstWarehouse.com. Wherever you go, please subscribe, leave us a rating and a review if you'd like, and please tell your friends about the show. Well, that's it for now, everyone. So until the next time, this is your host, Gary Binford, saying God bless you, God bless your families, and God bless America.